Hey everyone, Brestio here. Just giving you a little bit of an update of kind of the, updates that have been happening with the actual Middara module on Tabletop Simulator. For one thing, it includes this nice little pop-up that kind of goes over all the details of a lot of things that have been fixed. I don't think it includes the hot fixes. Oh, there you go, hot fixes. So there's still a few kinks here or there. Like I think there's a missing objective color, which I just kind of work around. I've been using this version on my personal playthrough, and will eventually be by the time my backlog is done, I'll be transferring our current the I guess the YouTube playthrough to this as well, or whatever is the latest. So big thing, major thing, Chapter 3 is now available. The people that created the game, Succubus Publishing or whatever names you wish to associate with them, they did say that they intend on having all of Act 1 in the Tabletop Simulator module. So that means literally everything. That means all 5 chapters, which there are 5 chapters for Act 1. I don't know if they'll be including any promo cards or not. If they don't, and they end up just sunsetting this module or whatever, I may see about trying to figure out how to add in my own assets and just add in the assets that are missing for my own personal use. Obviously, it'll only be for my personal use because, copyright and all that. Anyway, so some key things here. New loot level, which is important, especially since they had the bounty already in, and the bounty actually has uncommon consumables in there. So now you can actually do it legit. AI tiles can now spawn models required for them. They also have their own health counters above their number. They also associated with their number and color. And then there's a bunch of cool things you can do with it. Also, all AI tiles also have their own die rollers, which I'll show off in a little bit. And it's kind of just giving you the directions how to do it. Even more important, the crawl mode has been added. There's a book called the Crawl Book, which is essentially, I talked about it before. There's story mode, and then there's the crawl mode. Crawl mode is kind of where you just make up a party from scratch and just go on an adventure. And what sort of things you have available at the start depends on what sort of crawl mode module you're doing. I believe it has all of them. I don't know. I haven't really checked. I don't intend on doing anything with crawl until I've unlocked characters. So I guess the cool thing about the crawl book is you can use any characters you want for the adventure. Any characters that have been unlocked, that is. So right off the bat, you can of course use the standard Remy, Zeke, Nightingale, and Rook. But if you happen to unlock other characters, some characters in story mode end up joining you, and when they join you, you get to use them in crawl mode as well. There's also characters that don't join you, but you still get their card, and you can actually end up using them in crawl mode, because there's some characters that are just not part of the story narrative. For example, promo characters are usually not included in the main storyline. So in order to actually play those characters, you either have to ignore be fine with the dissonance and just throw the characters in story mode, or you can just do a crawl run and see how it goes. So once I kind of unlock enough characters, I wouldn't mind doing a crawl run with some of those characters that I may or may not end up using in the story mode. And then the rest of the stuff here is a bunch of just reorganization, and then the rest are just hot fixes that they've been fixing. I don't know when their last update was. I haven't updated my other version recently, so they might have fixed some of the issues. The only issue I tend to run into is sometimes some of the pre-generations don't work completely right, but for the most part they do okay. Also, sometimes the draw order for things kind of goes off. Like for example, the reset button ends up kind of going a little bit into the table, and you can't see it, but you can still click on it, so it's not a big deal. And sometimes, like in the adventure sheet, anything I've written down here and below ends up kind of like getting eaten up or something. It usually fixes itself, so it's not too big of a deal. So I'll kind of just go quickly over the layout. This is just mainly to save time for the other playthrough, because obviously I'm going to be busy with all sorts of other things, trying to like progress and all that. But yeah, so most of the stuff is pretty standard. They actually added 2 locations that have the time and urgency tokens, so you don't have to grab them from up here anymore, though they are up here if you need them. Yeah, they're right there. Obviously the dice and all the stat stuff are there. I still sometimes make copies of these and take them down here so I can use them a little bit quicker. They added dice things you can grab dice from alongside here, so you can just grab them whenever you want. This is actually pretty helpful because you've noticed how I usually play. I usually have a bunch of dice in front of me, so I have them on hand. But technically, I can kind of just grab these anytime I want. I still, by just muscle memory and habit, I still end up just grabbing from up here for some reason. But it is down here. Over here, we have all the disciplines. All of them are all together, just kind of like before. But if you hit sort, it'll actually distribute them all based off their levels and stuff. This is kind of helpful because it means you don't need to if you really need to put away disciplines or something like that, you can just throw it into there and hit sort. So I think you can only do one of these at a time, so just be sure to let it finish before you finish the other one. And then up here we got all the upgrades. It's a lot easier to work with now. They actually have a set place you can use them at. So for example, if we had otherworldly unlocked, we can just drag it out and then just have it there to show that we have unlocked it. Over here, pretty standard stuff. The mundane loot, all the accessories, they're all now just together as they should be. Monster loot is all together, and then as you progress, you can click on these to unlock the next tiers and go from there. Up here, just things like it's pretty much the same stuff as before. Variant cards, Exalted Espers, Familiars. What's it called? Abraxas dice, opponents, and then some stuff for certain quests and things like that. Why does it say 2 BP? Oh, I don't know why it's like that. Okay. Well, apparently there's a Blighted Brute in there. I don't know why. Alright. Standard stuff for the hidden cards. I think originally it was up in the top left. Now it's in the top right. Still the same stuff as before. So, if I did do UM1 or whatever, get those. Alright, standard stuff for the loot stuff. It has the same table and it just slides over, and then you click restore or the other thing to reorganize it. Let's see, is the objective still missing? Yeah, it's missing an objective. It's missing yellow. I don't know why it's missing yellow, but it's missing yellow. Whenever you do a load page, though, it will kind of auto-copy everything. So if you need to, you can just use a different color and just leave it face down and make it white if you ever need to. That's kind of what I do. Or I reuse a color that's already been resolved, just so I don't have to worry about it. Everything else I think is pretty standard. It should auto-shuffle every time you do a load page in a clear. That includes the fragger bulbs. Those get shuffled every time. Standard stuff here, terrain. What you have to do is, if you ever have to add terrain, you can just drag it out, make copies, and then return it. I think it gets refreshed anyway whenever you hit clear, but I usually just put it back just in case. Map tiles, pretty standard. They're just all together, just like before. They have the audio narrators for chapter 1, 2, and 3. I haven't really tried them. I just download them and just use them for my own folder, and kind of go from there. And everything else I think is pretty standard. The initiative cards are over here with everything else. And I think that's everything as far as that stuff is concerned. Yeah, they just reorganize stuff. There's a lot more room to play around with, so if you end up getting extra characters and things like that, you can kind of just put them alongside here or over here, things like that. So just real quick. So they do have the figures. If you just need to grab a figure for whatever reason, you can still grab them. You shouldn't need to, because what you can do instead is you can do something like, I don't know, grab some cave sickles here. And what you can do, if you mouse over these, it shows little buttons. I find that every time I try to click on them, I end up grabbing the card. So what you should do is, if you mouse over it and hit L, or you can right-click and go to toggles and choose lock, and that'll keep it so you keep it from prevent you from picking it up again. And then anything you need, you can just be like, all right, click 1, gives you the health bar for them, and then the cave sickle in question, and Same thing here. You can do that and that, and go from there. And then you can click on this to add damage until they meet or exceed their current health and kill them. And then you might notice there's little highlights around all the dice here. So what you can actually do is, if you're just, Cave Sickle by itself, make an attack roll, click this here, and it will spawn the dice off to the side there, and roll it. And then if you want to do a conviction roll, it'll replace those dice. Same thing here. If it includes a empower die, it will include the power die. The only thing it doesn't include is if you're using a combatant like a Gavaden. Gavaden have agile, which means they dodge the first attack that goes at them. They don't. There's no just raw black die, so you would have to grab a black die for that. So usually what I end up doing is I just grab one black die just to keep track of it, and then just roll that manually. And then anytime you have to roll, you can either, once the dice are there, you can either highlight and re-roll them yourself, or you can just click it again and I'll just do it. It resets the position a little bit, but the rolls are completely random in physics, so it shouldn't really matter. It's still random. And that takes care of all of that. There was a few mistakes, which I did send a message on Discord. I don't know if they actually fixed it yet. So, for example, Grizzle Gavaden, which is the upgraded Gavaden. Yeah, it's not fixed. Alright, so on the card it says it has 18 health and it has 16 up here. So be sure, even though there's these things still here, I would be sure to be sure it matches the stats it should be matching. Because sometimes it doesn't. It's not a big deal. You can still use this. It's just, you'll just need to make sure you get kill at 18 and not 16. Now this does not work for command tiles, unfortunately. For a few reasons. They don't work for command tiles mainly because in the case of summons and conduits, those are all variable. But even on characters that are not conduits or summons, they're pretty much just similar to these adventure cards. You would have to just pull out the dice and roll those manually. So there's that. I think that is it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I apologize ahead of time for any errors in my other playthrough. There is one major one that I'll be fixing once I actually get through the backlog again. It's not a huge deal as far as like it affecting the game or anything like that, but it is something I misread and I figured out later on. So yeah, as for what I've been doing, as for my personal playthrough, I started a fresh run because I messed up how to handle things like the alternate cards on my first personal playthrough, so I restarted and did a different build. And I'm currently going through Chapter 3 and seeing how that plays out. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with the game. There's definitely a few concerns towards later on with how they handled some of the bosses. I do have like the print and plays of like their Beta 6 and Beta 7 cards, and so I got to see kind of how they changed some of the bosses. And some of them, for lack of any other explanation, they heavily bolstered their HP, which some of the fights I agree they did kind of need higher HP, but others I ended up just questioning and not approving of. But I'll talk more about those once we actually encounter them. But overall, as far as like builds are concerned, with the exception of some of those boss fights I'll talk about later when we encounter them, and possibly even further along, because some of the HP changes are ridiculously high, in my opinion. But I'll deal with that once I actually experience it. But as far as like different builds and things like that, it's really, that's kind of the main draw. And a lot of people in Discord kind of agree. It's just like you can do so many builds in this game, and like even with just mundane stuff. And then the moment you unlock common and uncommon, like it just kind of expands further and further, like the depth of the game. It's really kind of crazy. And then when you get other characters joining your group, you can kind of start fresh with them in a lot of cases, and kind of just seeing what's available. So I think, like, as far as like, I believe for the current YouTube playthrough, I have a summoner, backpack character with a bunch of buffs and heals, and then what was it? An archer, and then of course we got someone that's like a paladin smiting type. On my personal playthrough, I have a meleeer that's using martial dual wielding. I have Zeke as my archer. I have Nightingale as a debuffer type caster, and then Rook I had as a healer, and then later on made him into the smite paladin nonsense. And then I had some other opportunities to kind of mess with other builds as well. So, like I said, there's plenty to mess around with. In hindsight, as far as the YouTube playthrough, I think I should have grabbed Otherworldly as one of the upgrades because it's super, super good, by the way. It makes it so you gain... It makes it so even your physical attacks can do magic damage. And also, a lot of the physical weapons, like longswords and like axes and stuff, usually only have things for shields and burst. And getting Otherworldly ensures that you have access to spell books as well that aren't just wasted. But I've rambled on enough. Like I said, I just wanted to give a brief update about the state of the tabletop simulator module itself, as well as a little bit of feedback about the game. You guys should be caught up with my backlog in about a few weeks, and once that happens, we'll be hitting the ground running again. So until then, I am the Depressed Viewer, and this was Middara on Tabletop Simulator. See you guys later.